terus. Terus soalnya
sir. Good morning, sir.
Hello. Sir. என்ன சார்? ஆமாம்மா, D43 ஓகே. ஓகே. என்ன வின்சி ஜாயின் பண்றாங்களா சார்? ஓகே ஓகே. சரி. ஓகே 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 சார். இப்போ ஹலோ, எனக்கு இதுல சாட்ல வர queries மட்டும் எனக்கு ஃபார்வர்ட் பண்ணுங்க சார். வாட்ஸ்அப்ல. ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே.
ஒன்னோட போனனால இப்ப இது மாதிரி இருந்துச்சு. இப்ப ரீடியம் இருந்துச்சு.
சார் பிசி ஒன்று ஜாயின் பண்ணிருக்காங்க. இல்ல நான் கட் பண்றேன்.
So can you hear my voice? I am Dr. Ganeshan. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay, can you see the video?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
சவுண்டே கேட்கலையே.
Good morning, madam. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I am Dr. Ganeshan. Are you hearing me, madam?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Welcome, madam. Welcome.
சவுண்டே கேட்கலையே.
Good morning, madam. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I am Dr. Ganeshan. Are you hearing me, madam?
Yes, I can hear you.
Welcome, madam. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Morning, madam.
Good morning, madam.
Madam Kritika, you can start the program.
Yes. Good morning, madam. Sir, good morning. Shall we start?
Morning. Yeah, I'm ready, ma'am. All set.
Ma'am BC, ma'am, shall we start, ma'am?
Yes, start.
Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to invite you all to this collaborative webinar on research funding. May I request Dr.M. Ganeshan, Additional Dean Research, to deliver the welcome addresses.
Good morning to all of you. I am very happy that Department of Dean Research and Thai Mugabike Dental College of Dr.M.G.R. Educational and Research Institute jointly organizing a collaborative webinar on research and funding, the basic and approach to be successful. So this webinar has been arranged in the right time, because this year 2020 the Union government has allocated 13% hike for the research and development, and I think many people will get benefit out of it. So I have
மியூட் பண்ணிடுங்களேன் ரங்கநாதன். டாக்டர் ரங்கநாதன், உங்களுக்கு மியூட் பண்ணுங்க உங்களுத.
I have great pleasure in welcoming our Vice Chancellor Madam Dr. Geeta Lakshmi to the webinar. I also welcome Dr. Kannan Ranganathan, speaker of today. He is head of Department of Oral and Maxillofacial Pathology at Ragas Dental College, Chennai. So I also welcome Dr. Kritika, Vice Principal of Thai Mugambika Dental College, Dr. Priya Ramani, Professor at Thai Mugambika Dental College. So I have to welcome all the participants, because we have got an overwhelming response for this webinar. Nearly 450 to 500 participants have registered for this event throughout the globe, not only in India, in other parts of India also participants have registered. I'm very happy about that, and I'm very happy to welcome all the participants to take part in this webinar. And I'm sure that all of you will be benefited by this, and how to select a topic for the proposal, how to write proposal, or what are the funding agencies. So all those things we will come to know at the end of 1 hour. And also I request the participants to be also interactive. You can post your questions in the chat boxes continuously as and when you get the doubt. Please do not interpret in that is don't interrupt in between the webinar. So you can post your questions in the chat box, and at the end, our speaker will be clarifying all your doubts. So once again, I have a great pleasure in welcoming one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. May I now request our respected Vice Chancellor, Dr. S. Geeta Lakshmi ma'am, to address the gathering.
Very good morning to all of you, and it's my pleasure to be with you today morning, with you all, and particularly Ranganathan who would be the speaker, and I also thank Kritika, the principal of Thai Mugambige Dental College, and the research department who had made this possible today for people and also the MGR Educational and Research Institute, deemed university, which caters to thousands of students. So this is very important and has many faculty in different branches. So this is very important, and I also should congratulate the Thai Mugambige Dental College for getting the very good ranking in the national level, which came a few days before, and because of its performance, good performance by the faculty as well as the postgraduates, because of their research publications and what not to say. So this is very important right now today in all the branches, medicine, dentistry, whatever you call it, arts, science, humanities, architecture, engineering, business management, whatnot. So today it's not only a performer, I would say a faculty or a performer has to have a lot of publication in a highly indexed journal, and we have to follow certain criteria which is being fixed by those journals. So whenever you are asking for funding, because I've been an expert committee member in many of the funding scrutinization, what first they would see is looking for the number of publication in the indexed article, H index, citation index, and many other, which they go through it and then they fund for their proposals. This is what I have noticed, and which we have to make ourselves coming forward to do a lot of publication in only highly indexed national and international journals. If not, you are nowhere in your profession, and this would lead you to the name and fame, and also funding for your department or the institution. So first thing is, what I've seen is you have to come out with an idea, and I usually say, whatever you do in a day to day, convert it into a research, and start doing publication and send proposals to get funding. So this is what I usually say to the people whomever. But we forget every day. We do our work routinely from during the timing where we are into the hospital or into the office, and till then we go out, till then we do our routine work. So this routine work, I usually say, should be converted into a research proposal. So whatever work you do in your department, convert it into a newer form of ideas, ask questions why you are doing this, for what purpose, everything, and this would be converted into a small idea. From the small one you can make a bigger one, and thus you can have your proposals ready, where you have to go through the other articles of the same kind of subject you had formed as a question or an idea, and see that how the study can be done through the other publications, and it would be definitely, and also getting funding. With the more the number of publication in an highly indexed journals, the more you are you are exposed to get, you would be able to get funding. So that is the only word I can say right now, and I wish this the whole day to get knowledge on the how to get your research proposals ready to make it possible to get the funding. So today, I think so you will all learn the facts of how to prepare your proposal and get your research funding. Thank you one and all, Ganesan and your team in the research department and the dental college for making me to come for the inauguration on this the research and funding. Thank you one and all. On
Thank you,
behalf
madam.
of the
Thank you, madam.
MGR Educational Research Institute, Madurai.
Thank you,
Thank
madam.
you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and honor to have you. And thank you so much for your encouraging words. I may now request Dr. Priya Ramani, Professor of Oral Medicine Radiology, Thai Mugambike Dental College, to introduce the speaker, please.
Maxillofacial Pathology, Ragas Dental College. He has finished his BDS from Madras University and completed his postgraduation degree and PhD from Dr. Tamil Nadu Medical University. He is also an MS from Ohio State University, USA. He has held several distinguished positions in our state, national, and international levels too. He has been the secretary and president of Indian Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Pathology. He has been the first Indian to hold the post of the Asian Counselor for International Association of Oral Pathology in the year 2014 to 2016. He has also served as the Secretary General of Asian Society of Oral and Maxillofacial Pathology. He is a visiting professor in the Faculty of Dentistry for the University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur. He is currently the president of the Asian Society and Oral Maxillofacial Pathology. He is the chairperson in the fellowship committee of the Indian Association PhD University. He is a PhD member in the Board of Studies for the NTR University, Andhra Pradesh, and Sri Ramchandra University. He is a PhD reviewer for Manipal University, Wits Medical School, Johannesburg, University of Otago, New Zealand. He has had an outstanding performance in his student life right from his college days. He was a university first in the second year, third year, and consecutively in the final year, and finally awarded as a best outgoing student. He has also received the Benedict Graduation Research Award for the Best Research Society Annual Research Award from Ohio State University, USA. He has also been awarded the Best Teacher Award in the year 2011 for his perpetuating academic excellence from Tamil Nadu Dr.M.G.R. Medical University, Chennai. He has also served as a reputed journal for the indexed in PubMed and Scopus-like journals of Oral Maxillofacial Pathology, Indian Journal of Dental Research, Oral Oncology, Oral Diseases, and many others. His area of interest is research in cancer and precancerous lesions, HIV, and stem cell research. He has got around 154 publications to his credit in various national and international journals. He has also contributed in writing texts. He is the most sought out speaker who has given national and international presentation and has been invited as a guest speaker over a station. And today we are privileged to listen to him virtually. It is my privilege and honor to welcome him.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Priya, for that introduction. Sorry to interrupt, sir. Thank you so much, Dr. Priya.
அவரை வந்து சரியா பொசிஷன் பண்ண சொல்ல நம்ம ரங்கநாதன் yeah, now only you are visible.
Oh, okay.
Only your head was visible.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
Sir, our principal, Dr. Ratika Rai, would like to welcome
Sure.
you and the others. So, Madam. Ma'am? Dr. Atika Rai, Principal, Thai Mokambike Dental College. Ma'am, over to you. Ma'am, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Good morning.
Yes,
Are you able to hear me? Yeah.
yes, please. Go on.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Madam VC Madam. Thank you for being here with us. And a warm welcome to our esteemed speaker, Dr. Ranganathan. So it's a great pleasure to have you here, sir, today amidst us, a very well-renowned speaker. I think I congratulate the Department of Oral Medicine along with the Department of Teen Research who has come up about with this wonderful session. So without much ado, I will welcome Dr. Ranganathan and ask him to start over his speech, which is much awaited by people all over. Thank you once again, sir, and thank you, VC Madam, by being here amongst us today in this webinar. Thank you.
Sir, over to you, sir. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure always to interact. I've done this a couple of times with your institution before. Before I start, let me thank you and your team, Dr. Kritika, your institution, and the Vice Chancellor for having made time to be here. She may not know, I got a little bit of tremor in my voice is because she was my teacher way back when I was doing my BDS. Madam, thank you very much. It's an honor to speak in front of you. And thank you for taking the time to inaugurate this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And without much ado, let me start. Just give me a few minutes to get the feel of this. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible? The audio is okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Kritika for many years. And when she called me up and said, I need you to make a presentation on research methodology, it was a tough call because it's a huge topic and there are different facets to it. But what I'm going to do is probably focus on exactly what the Vice Chancellor said today. That is, what preparations you need to make, how you need to prepare yourself, and how you need to write to get the funding. And to make my job easier, what Dr. Kritika did was she collated some questions from the participants and she passed it on to me last evening. And then I had to sit last night and rework my whole presentation. So it was helpful in one way, a little bit of tough work in another way. Thank you very much, Dr. Kritika. Okay, at any point in time, if I'm not audible, one of the organizers can give you a missed call or WhatsApp to me or pull up a chat box. My phone is next to me, so I'll make sure that I correct that. Okay, this is very important before we start. Research is to see what everybody else has seen and to think what nobody else has thought. So it's a thought process. It is a very, very dramatic change or shift in thought process. And for the medical and the dental people, it's a little bit difficult because most of us are used to think clinically and research needs a totally different mindset. And that's what I shall show you today. This is what my initial slide was before I saw the questions that Dr. Kritika sent me. Am I too fast? Is the speed okay?
Perfect, sir. It's perfect.
Okay, fine. Yeah. This is one disadvantage with the technology. I mean, you can't see people's face and get a feedback. So any point, please stop me. Now, this was what my initial presentation was designed to talk a little bit about the research fundamentals and then getting the money part, which is very important for all of us. Then I got all the questions. Then I realized all the questions which the participants of today's interaction had questions which could be clubbed into three parts. How do I start research? Where do I start? Who do I go to for money? Where do I get the money from? And surprisingly, a lot of people wanted to know how to succeed in research. I mean, how do I make sure that I'm successful? And that's okay, because everybody wants to be successful in the field which they choose. So these were the three main areas of interest. The first one was the questions fell into two groups. How do I choose a topic? And how do I know what type of study I should do? Of course, funding, what type of funding and where do I go for funding? The last one is the really tricky one. How do I succeed? That requires two qualities. You need to lay a foundation for your research, and you need to have a mindset. I shall talk a little bit in detail about this. Regarding funding and how to start, uh, being a dental person, my examples are going to be a little bit towards the medical side. And I've been told that people from humanities and other specialty have joined us. So I've tried to use examples which can relate to everybody as far as the research question is concerned. Or more simply, at the end of the presentation, this is what you're going to take home with you. Know the lingo or know the language. This is very, very important, especially when you're applying to huge funding agencies. May not be important when you apply within your institution, but when you apply to national bodies, when you apply to international bodies, you work with collaboration, you need to be very clear about the terms which you use. For example, just 3 days back, I got a proposal for an international project collaboration they're trying to do, and they had got the aims and objectives mixed up. It happens to us all the time because we loosely speak of aim and hypothesis, aim and objective. But when you're writing a grant or writing a paper, these have specific connotations and you need to be very, very careful about it. And the steps in research. For a person who's starting research, it can be pretty daunting. Where do I start? Who do I go to? What do I do? If you follow these 4 or 8 steps, just write it down when you start your research. Go in the same order. Do not skip steps. And if you do it methodically, you'll be a good researcher. Then a brief look at what type of studies you can put in and where do you put which type of study. A little bit about grant proposal and how do you write it, and a lot about the mindset you need as a researcher. These are all not going to be in the same order, point number 1. Point number 2 is all the things which I'm presenting today, I have faced at some point in life on either side of the table. As a person who started off the research, I made a lot of mistakes. When I submitted my research and tried to present it at national and international forums, I made a lot of mistakes. And now when I sit on the other side of the table and I'm trying to review projects, I look for these mistakes in someone. So these are based on what I've gone through. So they will make a little bit of sense if you have already written a lot of grants. But if you're a beginner, these are pitfalls you'd like to avoid when you're starting your research. This is very important, very, very important. What is the research process, research and study design? People tend to confuse these terms. So when somebody says, tell us what your research process is going to be, you need to say something. When somebody says what your research or study design is going to be, it means totally something. So be very clear about these terms. Okay, don't get carried away. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but when you Google for research, this is what you will get. Can be very, very daunting if you're a person who's starting research. But these are the terms you have to be careful about. The research process involves multiple steps.
Sir,
You can see down.
sir, for a small request.
Yeah.
Yeah, please, members who are in this Google Meet, kindly mute your audio, both in YouTube as well as you get echo from others. Disturbing speakers. So
Yeah.
please mute your YouTube audio as well as this audio. Kindly mute. Some disturbance are coming in the voice.
Okay.
Members of this, please do this. Thank you.
Yeah. There's a request for all of you to mute your mics. I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. Okay.
Well, can you please move a little forward if you don't mind, sir? A little higher volume would help. Sorry. Really
No,
sorry.
I have got, I can increase the volume. I have got a headphone on. Okay.
Yes.
Is it now better?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
I'll increase my volume. Okay. The research process involves a lot of downstream. It includes the question, the proposal, the design, the data collection, the analysis, and reporting. So the entire gamut of thinking of an idea, getting the money, and finishing sort of falls under the research process category. The research design involves actually how you do your study. Once you have the research question, your proposal done, and your hypothesis, your aims and objectives. That's what research design is about. And one of the main subgroups or subheading of research design is the type of study. So now you can see how when you say research process, it means something. When you say research design, it means something else. And when you say types of study, the research study or the design, it means something else. So be very clear when you use these terms in your proposal. Okay, once again, this is just to show you what will happen if you Google and say, how do I frame my research methodology? It can be very, very daunting. You have problems, you have mode, your strategies, your domains, your formal techniques. So this is what happens. This is one of the examples which you will get. And there are multiple examples which can be as confusing when you're starting your research process. So let me sort of deconstruct or simplify it for you. Are you looking at a diamond on the left? Looks beautiful, looks very complex and very shiny, very expensive. But if you break it down, it's actually this single carbon molecule, which is in the crystal lattice. So it's so easier for us to understand how this repeating structure reflects light. And that's why diamond is shining, and it's very haphazard in your graphite or the lead which you use in your pencil, and that's why it's not shining, it's very soft and it is very cheap. So the whole idea of this presentation is to sort of simplify and deconstruct things so that you can put it together and ultimately your proposal will be something like diamond and as complex as that. Okay, now this is very important to understand. If at all you take anything back home, please take this. Research is systematic. There is nothing haphazard about it. It's a very, very systematic process and it generates new knowledge. I see a lot of people bringing me an article and saying, I want to do this. I want to repeat this. That is validation. It is a type of research, but not necessarily new knowledge. And it either solves a problem, and this is very important, I like this, or improves an existing practice. The other thing is when you start research, you want to cure cancer, you want to cure HIV, you want to find a medicine for COVID-19, all that is fine. But let's take the COVID-19 scenario. You can have a research proposal which says that I want to cure COVID-19. That is one way of doing things. Or you know that currently the test used for COVID is they put a huge cotton swab into the nose, right up to the oropharynx. I don't know if any of you have had it done, hopefully not. But even if you're going to have it done, it's extremely uncomfortable. And it goes right through your nose to the back of your throat. And if you can Google images, it looks uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable. So you could say, let me see how I can make the nasopharyngeal swab more easier to do so that it's comfortable to the patient, it's comfortable to the person who's taking it. Let's say take just saliva and do it. So you see, you're not solving a problem, but you're taking an existing problem and you're making it a little bit easier. So that is also good research, and that is an important thing to keep in mind. Okay, I like this. There are 4 pillars. This is true for research, and this is true for writing a paper or a grant. First, you need to think of a good idea. You need to do a lot of hard work in the library, or in today's context, in front of your computer, Googling all the indices. Do the actual work. The most important thing is, once you're done, you need to communicate. And I think this is the point the Vice Chancellor made very, very, very clear. Whatever you do in your department, make it into a presentation or make it into a paper. And let me emphasize this. No research is complete if you don't communicate. You can do fantastic research if you don't present it, if you don't write it, if you don't publish it, so that your peers can look at it and evaluate. It's not research. It's incomplete research. So these are the 4 pillars of research. Think of an idea, do the hard work, do the work, and then write or communicate. If it seems too simplistic, I have a 8-step procedure which I tell my students and everybody to follow. You could put this in your logbook or front of your research book and do this exactly in the same step which I said. That way you will not trip. First, from the bottom up, think of a good idea. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Review the literature. And once you have done that, you will know what has already been done, what are the mistakes other people have done, and what you need to avoid and what you need to address. Then you generate the hypothesis. So do not have a hypothesis and then go see the literature. You'll have a lot of problems with that. Don't say, sir, this is my hypothesis. Where do I do my review of literature? It doesn't work that way. Idea, review of literature, then the hypothesis. Don't even think of the hypothesis before that. Once you have the hypothesis, you design the study based on your aims and objectives. Then your feasibility and ethics. Now, this is very, very important. When I do a presentation, I normally blank out feasibility and ethics, put all the points and ask people to guess. Obviously, I cannot do it in this forum. Without your feasibility and ethics, don't even bother about which antibody you're going to use, which technique you're going to use, which test you're going to use. First, make sure that it is feasible. And feasibility falls into two categories. You have the money to do your study. Two, you have the time to do your study. Both these are important. When you talk about feasibility, you have the wherewithal, you have the money and the place to do it, and you have the time to do it. A lot of times, I'll get fantastic projects, very well written. They will have all the money, the institution will fund them, very ethical, passed by the IRB. But when I ask them where they're going to do it, they will say, no, sir, we are trying to explore our collaborators. Don't do that. It is doomed to fail if you do that. If you're going to collaborate, get all the letters of support, make sure it's feasible, get everything ethically clear, then go to the next step of doing your experiment and collecting the data. Sorry. And once you collect the data, you analyze, and once again, you communicate. If you do not communicate what you have done, your research is incomplete, and that's why I've highlighted it. I cannot overemphasize this point. You need to communicate. It could be a presentation, it could be an article in your university journal, or it could be in a national or an international or a highly indexed journal. Doesn't matter what. Communicate. That is very, very important. So these are the steps. So if you're starting your research, think of a good idea, review the literature, develop a hypothesis, design the study, look at the feasibility and ethics, and then start. Do not start before that. Collect the data, analyze the data, and communication. You may be thinking why I'm re-emphasizing this. I mean, time and again, I have seen people start the experiment and then go back to ethics and feasibility and say, sir, I started doing this. Now I'm not getting cases. I'm not sure this is possible. I'm not getting sufficient material. So if you do it in this order, you'll be a very peaceful and a happy researcher and a very productive one. Okay, comes to the first question. Yes, all this is fine, research idea and research question, but how do I get the question? Where does this question come from? It's very important to understand that. The question is important. A scientist is not a person who gives the right answer. He's the one who has the right questions. Now, I'm sure all of you have faced this. Halfway through the experiment, you'll go back to your mentor. Or if you're a mentor, your student will come running to you and say, sir, the results are not as expected. Stop. If you expect those results, you shouldn't be doing the research. You've got bias right there. So, which means you already have in your mind what your research results have to be. There would have been 9 national and international investigators who have done this and got an answer. And when you're doing your experiment, you may not be getting the correct answer. If your methodology is right, if the steps that you follow are right, that's okay. That's absolutely okay, one. Point number 2, if you do not get the result which you get, which you have hypothesized, say you say, I think A causes B. That is what a lot of people have proven. But in your study, you get a result that says A does not cause B. That is good if your methodology is correct. So don't think because you've not got results, it's bad. Because one thing you need to know in research, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, 1. 2, a lot of journals are actually now encouraging publication of null results or negative results, by which I mean you've done the study, but the results are not as conclusive as what the other investigators have found. That is also publishable. So don't think only when you have a positive result you're going to publish. If your question is correct, if your methodology is right, and even if the answers are not what you expected, that is good. That is good science. That is good research. So the focus is on the correct question and the correct methodology. Okay, a few things for the beginners who are starting your research, and I think that was a lot of questions. How do I get a question from the literature? Simple. Observations and research ideas. So what makes your boss, your mentor, or your guide better than you are? And you've not had an opportunity to make those mistakes, because mistakes make you learn things very, very fast. So it's basically collecting observations, narrowing it down, and having a research idea. So there are some fundamental qualities you need to develop. Once again, if you're in the medical faculty, as a clinician, you look at evidence, you sum the evidence and come to a conclusion. But in research, you need to look beyond the evidence that you have in hand, what's called lateral thinking. And let me give you some few examples. How can observation lead to research ideas? Examples that you all may know. You all remember what this is? This is Alexander Fleming's handwriting. He put some dishes. This is a famous example in microbiology. Forgot to clean it, put it in his lab, closed it over the weekend, came back after the weekend, and saw that there was some quiet growth, and saw there was a suppression of growth of organisms around this growth. And this led to the diagnosis of penicillin. If it were a normal person, what they would have done, oh my God, there is contamination, before my boss comes, let me clean it and throw it off. No, he saw there was contamination, and he saw that contamination had an inhibitory effect on certain organisms, and boom, you get penicillin, which is probably the single most important discovery to save lives in the history of pharmacology. So observation, no matter how trivial it is, you need to give it attention. You need to think out of the box. You need to think laterally. Question what you see and read. A note of caution, just don't question everything because you need to question. So there are two types of questions. One, to show that you know something. Two, to want to know something which you don't know. So you probably should be in the second category. For example, you look at these two balls. They both are of the same size. Both the checkered balls are of the same size. So when you look at it, they look different. So when you read journals, when you read articles, when you sit in presentations, keep an analytical mind open and be open to ask questions if something doesn't gel in your mind. Classic example, this is a spring, a hot spring in the US, where the waters can reach very, very high temperature. So what is the significance of this? I have something written down. Does anybody know what that is? Stack polymerase thermus aquaticus. All your genetic studies now are based on PCR, your polymerase chain reaction. It could not have been possible unless one scientist looked at this hot steam and found out that there's one bacteria that survives in this hot spring. How does it survive? Because the problem is, to replicate DNA, you need enzymes. And fundamental chemistry and biochemistry know enzymes are heat labile. A little bit higher temperature, and it gets inactivated. That's the problem with enzymes. So that's why when you have fever, you cannot digest, and you're asked to take soft food, easily digestible food, because all your enzymes are inactivated. But for expanding or multiplying DNA in a PCR reaction, you need an enzyme. So the investigator looked at this and said, my God, this bacteria is multiplying in this hot spring at high temperatures. So they took the enzyme from this bacteria, and that's why you have a polymerase chain reaction, without which almost none of the genetic studies would have been possible. So they were able to question, why does this bacteria survive? Everybody has been seeing it. So one person came up with that idea, and then you have a technology which has helped mankind to a great extent. This is very important. Like I said, you don't always have to solve a problem. You can think how an existing problem can be made better. Just not doing different things, but also a different way of doing things. This everybody knows now, thanks to COVID, right? I used to have automatic hand sterilizers everywhere, but thanks to COVID, people knew this was very expensive. So now, boom, every shop has got a pedestal. Simple, not rocket science. Necessity is the mother of invention. So they took a foot pedal, put your hand sanitizer there, and almost every shops and probably every house is going to have one of these now. So see, earlier we just had automatic dispensers. Now, because we needed a cost-effective solution for the general public, you have this. So it's a different way of doing same thing. That's what research is about. So research questions, you have to observe, distill your ideas, think a little bit differently, question the current norms and practices, and find out what your problem is and how to tackle it in a very holistic manner. Okay, now this is my way of looking at it, but if you read books, they will say your question should be finer. It should be feasible, it should be interesting, it should be novel, it should be ethical, it should be relevant. This is what books will give you. But when you sit in front of a funding authority, they're just going to ask you two words. So what? And I love this. So if you have a research question, you need to keep asking yourself, I need to do this. So what? No, this is what is currently known. So what? I think mine can make a big difference. So what? So I think I can help my patients or can help this project a little bit better. So this is a very crucial question which all funding authorities are going to ask. can be a little bit irritating, but you need to be able to define every stage of your thought process with this question. Or if you're more comfortable with this, make sure that it's feasible, it's interesting, it's novel, it's ethical, and it's relevant. Okay, now that is how you develop a research question. So you had a research idea, you made it into a research question. So what do you do next? You do what's called hypothesis, aim, and objective. For the very experienced of you, this may be a little bit simple. So the next few slides are going to be on this. So if you need to take a break, come back after 5 minutes. But this is a very important question for the beginners. It's very useful to understand that, because time and again, I see even people who are very experienced in the right proposals mess up this. Hypothesis is an idea yet to be proved. The aim is the general purpose of the study, and objective spells out exactly what one intends to do in the study. So usually there's a confusion between aim and objective. So it should be in this order. You have your hypothesis, you have an aim, and then you have an objective. Let me give you an example which you'll understand. Okay, everybody has a headache, and everybody has taken a tablet for a headache, be it in the medical field or the non-medical field. So I'm sure you'll relate to that. So instead of ibuprofen or brufen, or I didn't want to put a generic name, you can say tablet A. So you think that there's a new tablet in the market, and you think this is the best for your headache. That's your hypothesis, and you need to prove that. This could be anything. Type A is better than type B. Material A is better than material B for this particular process, whichever specialty you are in. So what is my aim? My aim is to study the effect of this drug, ibuprofen, on headache. What effect? Whether it relieves the pain, and that's called analgesia. Relieving the pain is called analgesia for the non-medical people. To study the analgesic effect of ibuprofen on headache. That is your aim. That's not the objective. The objective spells out the whole thing. To assess pain relief with ibuprofen, and what is the medicine which is already being used, let us say paracetamol, compared to paracetamol which is already in use, and how are you going to measure it? There is a particular scale called the VAS scale. It's called Visual Analog Scale. You're using that scale. So the objective clearly highlights what you're going to do, what are you going to compare it with, and how you're going to do it, and how you're going to measure it. If your objective is very, very clear, you will not land in a problem, because when you're doing the research, your funding authorities will come to you and say, what's your objective? What is the method? So if you have all this, you'll know everything. You'll know what you're doing, what you're comparing it with, what is the methodology you're using, and what is the scale you're going to use it to measure. And if you do not have all these 4 factors, you cannot have a study design. Because a lot of times people will say, I'm going to do a cross-sectional study. I'm going to do a longitudinal study. Ask them, what is your objective? And they'll say, I'm going to test ibuprofen for headache. No, you cannot design, because you need all these details. You need what is the drug you're going to test, or what is the material you're going to test, what is this gold standard you're comparing it with, or what you're going to improve it on, how you're going to do the comparison, and what is the scale you're going to measure. And this is very, very important. You have this, trust me, about 40% of your research headache is over. When somebody asks you if you can clearly delineate what your hypothesis is, what is your aim and objective is, you're good. One small thing about hypothesis, all of us want to do everything at the same time, and I'll talk about this when I talk about grants. I talk about COVID-19 because now that is the in thing, so everybody can relate to that. So one research you can do is COVID-19 is associated with high morbidity. By morbidity, I mean high degree of health problems. That could be a research question. It's too broad. You don't want to have an hypothesis that is so broad. You need to have a hypothesis which narrows, and you can do in a single statement. COVID-19 is associated with, everybody knows we don't have ventilators because COVID-19 patients have respiratory problems. So your hypothesis can be COVID-19 is associated with increased severe respiratory distress in the elderly. See how this mentions everything, which age group you're there. So you're narrowing down your hypothesis. If you say respiratory problem, then the question will come whether it's acute or severe respiratory problem, youngsters or elder. So hypothesis to some extent, you can refine it very clearly so that it answers one question. If your hypothesis is going to have multiple questions, you're going to be in a problem. And this is one of the most common mistakes people make when they start research. They have an hypothesis. It says, I'm going to test A, B, and C with D to make sure I can do D. E, sorry. No, doesn't work. Single question. Single, very sharply defined, and I cannot stress this too often and with too much emphasis. Very clear, single question is what hypothesis is all about, or single statement of what you're going to prove. Okay, once you have your hypothesis, aims, and objectives, then only comes the study design. You don't even talk about the study design before that. It's not like I'm going to do a cross-section study on this. No. You have your hypothesis, you have your aims, you have your objectives. Only then think of the study design. And study design is very complex, and it's like a one-week course on study design, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you the most important thing that you need, and most of this would apply to the medical fraternity, maybe a little bit to humanities, but you can extrapolate this to the other specialties if you want. I'll quickly tell you what are the most common type of studies we do, and just say what are the other studies that could possibly be done. But these are the study design components. I'm not going to talk about all these, but bear with me, but you need to know this is what it contains. It has type of study, sample selection, which is a separate course by itself, sample size estimation, your study protocol, your outcome measures, your type of the data, your acquisition of the data and validation of data, and statistical analysis. One note, which is very important, and many people do not say this in research methodology programs, statistical analysis should be figured out before you start doing your experiment. A priori, statistics is very important. I see a lot of people do all their studies, rush to the statistician and say, tell me if this is significant or not. It's going to be tough to do that. You need to do or find out what statistics you're going to do before you start your experiment. This is very, very important. And you can do that only if you know what your study design is. So your study design and your statistics are very closely intertwined. So do not do statistics after you finish all your projects, and don't think what type of statistics you're going to do once you're done with acquisition of data. Trust me, it's going to be a nightmare, and senior people who are here will agree with me that trying to do statistics without making room for it before you start your experiment is an utter nightmare. So these are the components of a study design, but I'm just going to talk about type of the study a little bit quickly, very, very briefly, so that you understand what are all the possible studies you can do, and when you should do what study, and how do you choose which type of study to do. Okay, things can get a little bit complex once again. This is one of the simple diagrams for study design, actually. There are different ways you can look at it: empirical, participatory, prescriptive, normal. There's tons of ways you can do it depending upon what specialty you are. But let me concentrate on two things which are very important: qualitative and quantitative, which is what most of the medical people do. You could also do the inductive and deductive. That will be applied to medical, humanities, and other specialties too. But these are the two most common things: qualitative and quantitative. And next, inductive and deductive. Depends upon what type of questions you frame. Okay, now this is a comparison of quantitative and qualitative research. Each has got a purpose, each has got a place. You can go through this when I'm talking about the important points. The most important thing is quantitative studies are very objective and qualitative studies are subjective. I tell you, each one has its own role, not that one is better than the other. And quantitative research tend to be descriptive and try to look for cause of a particular thing. They are causal research designs. Whereas qualitative are exploratory research designs. When you don't know what is happening, when you don't know what to do, then you fall back on qualitative. So they are also tremendously useful tools. So once again, let me emphasize, quantitative is objective, qualitative is a little bit subjective, can be made objective using certain scales. These are descriptive quantitative and are causal in their design. Qualitative are exploratory by nature of their design. Okay, quickly at the type of studies, you have qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative can be demographic or epidemiological. Demographic can be morbidity studies, mortality studies, cross-sectional, or so-called prevalence studies. Epidemiological can be controlled. You can control for certain thing, in which case it becomes experimental. And when it's just observation or uncontrolled, they're called as observational studies. Experimental studies, a classic example are randomized clinical trials, randomized control trials, and community trials. These are the best type of studies if we can do. These have got what is called the highest hierarchy of evidence. First of all, as researchers, you know what the hierarchy of evidence is. This has got the highest hierarchy of evidence, probably one step below systematic review and meta-analysis. So these are very good studies to do. If you have the time and the resources, do a randomized control trial. They are fantastic to do. But invariably, most of us end up doing case control studies or what are called cohort studies. These are the three: cross-sectional, case control, and cohort. Some people put prevalence studies in demographic and cross-sectional and observational. And if you like that, you could do that in your classification. So designs, you can have broadly qualitative and quantitative, demographic and epidemiological. And 95% of our quantitative studies fall as either cross-sectional, case control, or cohort. Most of the studies are that. And some of the best studies to do are community trials and randomized control trials. Once again, if you have the resources and time. Okay, there's a lot of confusion regarding cohort studies, cross-sectional studies. They're used in different contexts, in different terms, and I find people finding it difficult to actually pigeonhole this type of study. Think of it this way: past, present, and future. We look at time on a longitudinal manner. Anything which is done in present over a period of time constitutes cross-section. Just hold on a minute here. Something wrong with my net. Just okay. Sorry about that. Is cross-sectional. From the present, if you're going to follow up your data in the future, it becomes prospective, cohort. Of course, randomized control trials, which I spoke about a few minutes back, is also prospective. If you start from the present and look at cases on their history, then it becomes retrospective cohort. And your case control studies are also sort of looking back. So this will tell you exactly where your study falls into. Just a minute. Am I audible? Everything okay?
Audible.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course, I need to make sure I'm okay. All right, thanks. Okay, so once again, let me repeat. Cross-sectional in the present, cohort prospective, otherwise called longitudinal studies from the present to the future. Randomized control trials also is present to the future. Cohort, you can have retrospective. So cohort doesn't mean anything. You can have a prospective cohort and you can have a retrospective cohort. And then, of course, you have a case control study looking towards the back. So this is with respect to time. This is how most of the studies are placed. Okay, I'll just talk briefly about observational studies because these constitute the bulk of most of the research which you're going to be doing. Cross-sectional, case control, and cohort. Very quickly as to what they mean. They're also called prevalence studies. Let me skip that. Yeah. Let's take tobacco and cancer. I mean, everybody can understand this example. Let's say in the month of June, you're sitting at home, you have access to all the records. You can just get all these 4 data. Number of people have taken tobacco and who have cancer. The number of people who have taken tobacco who have no cancer. Don't take tobacco and have cancer. Don't take tobacco and have no cancer. If you have access to the records, just sit and look at this, get an idea of how these things relate to one another. And right there, you have a cross-section study. In a cohort study, with the same example, you say smoking tobacco causes cancer. You take about 100 smokers, you take 100 non-smokers, follow them for many years to see if cancer occurs. You see how difficult this can be. You have to keep following them until cancer happens. It's going to be very difficult. There are logistical problems and there are ethical problems because once you see a smoker, you need to convince them to stop smoking. As a doctor, you can't say, keep continuing smoking, let me see whether you develop cancer or not. We have a study going on. So there are ethical issues sometimes in doing longitudinal studies. Case control studies are fantastically convenient, and a lot of us fall back on this in the medical field. Simple. You're exposed to tobacco, that is the exposure, and over a period of time, you get cancer or COPD or lung disease. So exposure, over a period of time, you get disease. So what do? You take all the people with disease, all the people with cancer, You take all the people with no cancer. Let's say you take 100 people from Chennai with cancer, 50 males, 50 females. You match them, similar 50 males and 50 females who do not have cancer, then go back, take their history and see if they have been exposed to tobacco or not been exposed to tobacco. Exposed to tobacco, not exposed to tobacco. Then you have the cases in control. Then you do statistics, and then you come across a reason. So these are case control studies. It moves back in time, looks at the history with regards to exposure and disease. So you start with the disease and then look back at the exposure. Whereas a prospective cohort looks at the exposure and then sees which of them get disease. So case control studies are very good because usually you have a very short period of study where time is a constraint. If you need to do it in 2 years or 3 years, it's relatively inexpensive because you're looking at results and the cases are already there. It's only the logistics of acquiring cases and doing all the investigations. You can study several risk factors. You can take one case and look at tobacco, you can look at areca nut, you can look at alcohol, you can look at several risk factors. And you can rare and new studies is very good because number of cases are very less, and to do a cohort study would be a nightmare. So that is why case control is preferred. Let me give you an example which drives home this point between cohort and case control. It's a very nice example I picked up many years back, but tells you what the difficulty is. If you say, I have this problem, I don't know if I need to do a cohort or a case control. Look at this study. Let's talk about a rare heart disease, which means, which has like 2 people in 1,000 have this, newly born have this disease. And this is because the mother was exposed to something or ate something. So a rare heart disease, which happens in 2 out of 1,000 infants. And we think it is because of this one particular food substance which the pregnant mother has taken, let's say food substance A. So you can do this either as a prospective cohort study or a case control study. So what will the sample size difference be? Look at this. If you need to say, if the mother takes this particular food substance A, there is 2 times higher chance of the child getting the heart disease. So you have a question, does food A causes this heart disease in newly born? And your hypothesis is this food substance A increases the risk of this heart problem by 2 times. So mothers who take this are twice as likely to have children who have this problem. So if you do a cohort study, you will need 15,700 mothers who have been exposed to this food substance A and 15,700 who have not been exposed to food substance A. Whereas if you do a case control study in which you pick up mothers who have the children with defect and mothers who have children without this defect, you just need 188 cases and 188 controls. Look at the difference. Look at the time difference. Look at the resource difference you have. But when you get a result, a case control study will only show association, whereas a cohort study will show a relative risk or exactly what the cause is. And we can talk about this later if you're not aware of this. Okay, all this is fine, fantastic, qualitative, quantitative, demographic, epidemiological. I have this question, what study design do I do? The answer is very simple. Any question you take, depending upon the resources you have, you can do any type of study, any question. You can frame the hypothesis in such a way that you could do either qualitative, quantitative, any of the designs which I spoke about. Okay. Let's take a simple example. You have something which you don't know about, a material you don't know about, a disease you don't know about. Not much is known. And the first thing you do is a qualitative study. Then if you know that some of these factors are associated with this particular disease, A, B, and C, then you do what is called a prevalence study, or what we call as a cross-sectional study. And once you know that, yes, you have narrowed it down and said, this is the burden of disease with this particular cause, you can do cohort or a case control study. A cohort study, like I said, will give you the cause. A case control study will give you the association. Now, it's very important to differentiate between these two. Cohort is always better because it gives you a cause of a disease. Case control is good as far as resource constraints are concerned and can quickly do it, but it will only show association. So that's why when you do a cohort study, you get relative risk, and you do a case control study, you get what is called odds ratio. And if there is a doubt, we'll talk about this later, but you can go and look it up. Cohort is better because it is causal, Case control is a slight disadvantage because it's only association. Case control is an advantage because it's easier to do, quicker to do, less expensive. Cohort is more long drawn, has got a higher demand on your resources, both time and cost. Okay, I'm not going to go extensively into this, but this is the point I'm trying to make. Depending upon your research question and what your question is, you can have a randomized control, a longitudinal control, a cross-sectional, or a qualitative research. So the summary of the study design is, there are some common ones. Depending on your hypothesis, you can take a single question and you can do any type of research with that based on how you frame your hypothesis, how you frame your research question into a statement. And each of them has got a significance. For example, if you want to know whether one drug or one material A works better than B, randomized control studies are the best. Very nice. If you want to know whether it is safe or not, randomized control studies are best. If you want to know prevalence, how often the intervention is applied, what is implemented, how is it effective, then cross-sectional surveys are fantastic. And appropriateness of the group, qualitative researches are fantastic. So depending upon what question you ask, you can frame the study design. Okay, let me stop here. I think we decided not to ask any questions before, but I normally like to ask the audience if they have any questions. So please jot it down. We'll come back to that later. So let me summarize what I have done so far. I've told you how to start with your research question. I've told you to understand the important terms when you talk to your colleagues or write a grant. Be very clear when you say what a research process is, what a research design is, what a hypothesis is, what is an aim, is an objective. Go stepwise, very important. I told you about the study designs and how, based on your hypothesis, you could do any study design depending on the resources at your disposal. And also that statistics should always be thought about and accounted for before you start your research process. Sorry, before you start your study. Okay, now comes the interesting part about grant and grant proposals. Now, this is very important. This slide is very important, and I wish people had told me this many years when I started my research. Now, everybody wants money to do research, either individual or group research grants. But even before you apply for a grant the first time, understand that you should apply for smaller grants before you apply for a big grant. Apply for a grant to get yourself trained. For example, if you're a medical person from ICMR, it may give you a few thousand rupees, but gives you a track record that a government agency believes in what you're doing and trusts your credentials. So get some smaller grants, get it from the institution. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So get training grants for training and career development awards. In fact, you have grants for women who have discontinued their occupation for many years to take care of their family, and then they come back to work. You have separate grants meant for women in DST to sort of re-kick or restart their career. There are so many grants available. You can get grants to train others in your department for conducting a research methodology program. We have done that with ICMR. So your institution gets, I'm sure your institution has done that, but others can benefit that. Small grants from either institutional, state level, or at the national level. Hold meetings or educational meetings to get some money, even if you have money. See, the idea of getting money from a governmental organization is two things. One, to get money. Two, to make sure that your credentials get established. This is very, very important. I always say, getting money from a funding agency is like taking a loan from a bank. When you don't have money, the bank doesn't give you money because you need collateral. And that's when you really need money, when you're starting your career. But what does the bank look at to give you money? Whether you have got a previous small loan and which you paid off. So before you ask for 50 lakhs in a bank, you ask for 1 lakh and pay it back quickly. They say a car loan or something like that. And then your credibility increases, your credit score rating increases. It's the same thing with research. If you're going to apply for a grant, if you're going to apply for a big grant the first time, trust me, unless your collaborators are very good, you're not going to get it. So apply for small grants for training, for departmental or institutional training, for holding scientific or educational meetings. Infrastructure grants, small building facilities. Even if your institution has money, it's always good to get also money from some other outside source so that you build a reputation for getting funding and implementing the goals for whatever funds you have requested. So this is very important, that just getting money is not only about conducting research, but you lay a foundation by getting these small grants right from the beginning of your career. And this is what I'm telling you. Money attracts money. It's ironical, but it is true. And you will see a lot of researchers talking about this when you're doing multi-center collaboration. They'll say, let's aim for the low-hanging fruit. So whichever is easier, whichever is simpler, go for that. Don't have huge aims, don't have huge objectives when you're beginning. And you have a lot of special grants for PIs. When you're a principal investigator and you're just starting your career, don't try to go against the big hitters. You have separate grants, small grants. I mean, I don't want to use the numbers and terminology because it varies depending upon which specialty you are. If you're talking about ICMR, DBT, DST, or you're talking about international collaboration, they all have different codes and different terms. I shall give you a list of those terms at the end of the lecture. We can take a look at that. For new peers, so make sure that you apply for the correct category of grant. Training grants, there's something called seed funding grants. These are very relatively easier to get. Funding for administration during research. This is very interesting. If there are some research projects going on, you could club it under one head and ask for funding for the administrator to coordinate the different aspects of research. There are fundings available for that. And do not miss state and local association fundings. For example, the medical university may have a small grant for funding, get it. The quantum is important, but also the fact that you have got a fund. And when you get a funding from your own institution and go to the central organization, like say ICMR, they look at it and say, okay, fine. The institution trusts them. So that's the first step. And if you don't even have money from your own institution as a grant, how do you expect a national association to give you money? So it's going to be difficult, maybe possible, but it's going to be difficult. And go for the local association. For example, we being dental surgeons, we have a state Indian Dental Association that allocates some money for research, for small-time research for beginners. And then you have the National Dental Association. They give some money. So go stepwise before you ask for the big money. Okay, now this is a very, very important aspect. This is a whole 3-day program. So I'm just going to talk about each of these a little bit. See, a grant proposal has got these. You have a cover letter, you have a summary, you have a needs statement. These are all parts of a grant. Goals and objectives, methods and design, evaluation section, sustainability, information about you and the organization, and the project budget. And of course, you have a bibliography. Some of these, for example, a needs statement and evaluation section will sort of merge with goals and objectives and design in some of the projects from some funding agencies. But essentially, you need to have all this before you write a grant. Before you put all this together, you need to write a grant. Now, let me tell you a few points about these. Let me talk about the cover letter. The cover letter is very important. The cover letter is something which you probably write the last. You finished everything, and before you send up the project, you write the cover letter. Now, a couple of mistakes you should never do. Write it in the same format as the grant letter which you got. Suppose you got a grant letter regarding what all you're supposed to submit. Look at the format. Follow the same format, because this is an era of computers and they're going to open your document in computers. And if it's not in the same format, it'll look messed up. It'll look very non-professional. So this is a very small hint, but it's a very, very important hint which people overlook. Do the same format as you're expected to do. Address them very formally. Dear sir, don't go overboard with your respect. Don't be too informal. Look at how they have addressed and reflect that. This may sound very silly, but these are very important. And remember that this is the first thing they're going to see of your project. Even before they read everything, subconsciously, this is the first impression. Though the cover letter may be the last you've written, this is the first thing they see. So it should be neat, formatted, to the point, very clear with the reference number and what you intend to say. Don't write stories on that. Respect their time, respect your time. And I cannot overemphasize this. Cover letters are very important. And a lot of times I get proposals with very shabbily written cover letters. It creates a very, very bad impression. So please don't do that. Summary. This is difficult to address because each funding agency has got its own way. It can be either structured or non-structured. But one thing is to not exceed one page. Doesn't matter whether you're following a structured or a non-structured format. Do not exceed one page. Be very brief and to the point. And just give them sufficient information so that they look forward to reading your grant. So writing a summary is an art. Get yourself trained to do that. There are workshops which will teach you. And sometimes we do a separate day in research methodology courses to exactly how to write the summary and how to do it. I'll give you a few examples. This is very important. The need statement and goals and objectives which are merged sometimes. Your goals and I told you about the aims and objectives should be very, very, very clear. Do understand one thing, that because we know the subject which we are proposing for funding, we know a lot of technical details. The person who first receives it may be an administrative person who later on hands it to the particular team. They may have a scientific knowledge, but they may not know the nitty-gritty of the science you're talking about. So you need to dump it down a little bit. You need to dump it down. The best way I do is, once I write my project, I usually give it to a colleague who has no idea of the project and see whether he or she understands what I have written, whether my goals, my objectives are clear. If they are not able to understand, then probably you have been too complex. And that's a mistake we all make, being writing a manuscript or anything. There is a very, very interesting study in the net. I'm not going to talk about it. You can Google it and see. It's called the curse of knowledge. I think all researchers should read this when you're trying to communicate with your funding authorities. It basically presumes that when you're presenting, you presume that the person who is hearing knows a lot of science. That's really not true. So you need to make sure that a person who's not with the project, who's in the same specialty, can read it and understand very clearly what message you're trying to convey. And I think the evaluation section and sustainability is all about how you're going to do the project, what your timelines are, how you're going to measure all the variables, and what resources you have to measure all these variables. So that comes under the study design component. I'm sure it's specific to each one of you. So write a good cover letter, summarize within one page distinctly, and your need statement and objectives should be so clear that you should presume that even if the other person does not have a working knowledge of your hypothesis, they will be able to relate to your problem and understand what you're asking the money for. And the goals and objectives, this is what the textbooks will give. It should be specific, should be measurable, should be attainable, should be relevant, and should be time-based. And this I cannot overemphasize. If you think your project is going to take 2 years, ask for 3-year times. Trust me, I've seen no project being completed on the time which you think it's going to be completed in, because at least in the medical field, there are so many variables we can't account for. But for example, if you had submitted a research project last year, saying 3 years, I'm sure you would not have predicted COVID-19 scenario. It's absolutely impossible. And if you're doing something like a cell culture study, and you're not able to go to your institution, imagine how much it's going to set you back. You're basically going to start from scratch. So I'm not saying that everything is going to be so dramatic like the COVID-19 we are going through. But if you think you're going to complete in 2 years, at least say you're going to complete in 3 years. Don't give it too accurate. Have a buffer of at least 1 year. I'm talking about medical projects. I mean, depending on which specialty you are, you know what your buffer zone is. So it's called SMART. Be specific, be measurable, make sure it's attainable, make sure it's relevant, and make sure it's time-based. Proposal writing. We come to the nitty-gritty. It's just one aspect of writing the grant. There are a lot of other factors. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. No matter how good your science is, if your proposal is bad, it will not go through. And trust me, sitting on the other side of the table, I see very, very good science written terribly. So you need to focus on your writing. See, good science written terribly never gets funded. Bad science written well will not get funded. So you need to have good science, good writing skills. If not, today, we have a lot of people where you can contract your writing to. And I think even reputed high index journals do this. The moment you publish, they'll send you a note. When you send an article to them, you'll get a note from a parallel organization saying, can we help you with the English? These are former retired editors from such and such a journal, so we can help you with your language. And that is ethical nowadays. You can do that, actually. And to understand that, when you have workshops on proposal writing, take it in the context of mechanics. You need that. You definitely need that. But it's just a process of writing. It's not the mindset to do research. And for that, you need certain skills. I'll come to that in a minute. So the biggest predictor of getting funding is applying. Every year, you should at least apply for 3 grants. You probably get 1 in 2 years. Keep applying, keep applying. It helps in 2 ways. One, The people who are reading your grant knows that you're really serious about it. You keep on applying. Once again, the same analogy of getting a loan from the bank. You keep on sitting on the manager's head. Eventually, he's going to succumb within reasonable limits and give you the money. May not be how much you ask for. So visibility is very important. That doesn't mean you're going to give bad science, okay? Good science. Write lots of proposals, 3 per year. That's what normally I say. But if you're starting off, at least 2 per year. It takes a lot of time to write proposals. I cannot emphasize the next point too much. Take the reviewers' comments very, very positively. Very, very positively. Do not, if you take negatively, you will get frustrated, trust me. Take it with as a very positive criticism and move on. Improve based on the criticism. Try. If you get rejected once, try. But there have been some grants where I've applied 5 to 6 times and got it on the 7th time. Or at least my collaborators have got it on the 7th time. I just gave it up, joined somebody else to collaborate, and they got it the 8th time or the 9th time. So trust me, if you're perseverant enough, you will get it. And if your science is good, of course. Okay, and let me talk about certain facts which are never spoken about, but which I think are very important in addition to the science of writing and the science of your research methodology. You need to get a mindset. If you're going to take research as a career, please take the next few slides in the sense it's meant for. It is very, very important. And I have learned most of this the hard way. And you'd be surprised how simple things which I'm going to try to point out are relevant. And these are not my ideas. These are what I learned from my seniors, some by mistakes and some by my collaborators. Be very practical. You have to be very, very practical. Research also involves your personality. What is your mind frame? I'll talk about that in a few minutes. You need to be extremely philosophical to do research. And those are people who are rolling your eyes or raising your hands. That's why it's called PhD. It's called a doctorate in philosophy, not doctorate in anything else. You need to be extremely philosophical. You need to be extremely, what should I say? Have a mental strength to go through all the problems you'll go through. I'm not trying to be discouraging here. I'm trying to tell you that it needs a mental framework to do research. That's not pure science. Okay. Now, this is very important for those of you who are beginning research. Be very, very clear. What do you want to do? Either you want to become a full-time researcher, or you're going to do this research so that you get tenure and then you settle down, or you want to do clinical practice and research. So be very clear, because this will decide how much time you're going to spend in research. In fact, a lot of big grants will ask you, how many hours per week are you going to put into research? If you look at big grants, they'll say, okay, you're doing this work. So how many hours in a week are you going to put into research? You need to factor this. And that will be based upon whether research is going to be a full-time career or it's going to be a part-time work. Okay, the next one, you all know, how much will it cost, how long will it take, and where am I in a career? I may give you an example, may not be relevant to the beginners. A lot of times I see senior people, when they're going to retire at 70, they'll take a project at 68 years and they will get an extension. But that's a little bit of a risky thing to do for the person who is working under you. So you need to be very careful. And in case it's a person of exemplary knowledge and intelligence, and they have got tremendous advice and thing to give to us, make sure that with the funding agency, you're very clear. You say that my mentor is looking for resignation, I'm looking for retirement and this and this and that. So right in the beginning, apply for an extension. Make sure that, this is just an example. There are umpteen number of examples for this. And this is a practical example you faced in the recent past. So that's why I'm putting this there. And where do I see myself in 5 years? And be very clear about your goal lines and your, to be pessimistic or not to put you down. Trust me, you talk to research people, these are some of the things they will say. And I have gone through some of these, not fortunately all of these. No sleep, poor diet, life is chaotic, life is stressful. Anybody who's written a grant proposal knows this. You keep annoying people with your needs, you keep calling them at odd times of the day to make sure your project is complete. And when you're working, people tend to annoy you. Clashes in the office. Be very careful about the last one. Be very clear about your work time, your play time, and family time. Because when you're doing research, your research tends to gobble up all your personal space and time. Don't let that happen. Be very clear that, you have some time. Weekends, now I'm sure things have changed. Now, this was about 15, 20 years back. On weekends, if somebody is working, 6 times out of 10 they would be Indians working, because we are by nature very hard working, and we tend to work 7 days a week when we have a project, and we are driven to do that, and that's a good thing. I mean, that's why we excel in most of the fields throughout the world. But sometimes you may have to sacrifice your personal life for that. So be very, very careful right at the beginning of your career. And if nobody has told you this, all people who are beginning research should keep this in mind when you're starting research. Make sure you have definite set timeline boundaries between your work and your personal space. I cannot overemphasize this too much. Okay, now this is very important. This is how you get funds. This is the most important slide as far as getting funds is concerned. Now, develop a goal-oriented lifestyle. When you're doing research, there is nothing called free time. Like I said in the previous slide, the research will sort of expand to gobble up all the available time. So be very clear what are the times you're going to work, how you're going to work. And based on, don't do this voluntarily. Research will force you to change your lifestyle, and you don't want to do that. So right in the beginning of your research career, define what your lifestyle is going to be based on your goals. Publications, which was stressed right in the beginning of this session. Partnering, I'll talk about that a little bit. Networking. Submit proposals. And the last two are very important. Develop a national reputation. And that happens over a period of time. And once people know you, you get more and more projects. It's just common sense. And the last one is very, very important, recognizing an opportunity. I cannot overemphasize this. For example, have this fantastic opportunity to be before you all because I know Dr. Kritika. And I think our work relation started many years back when she had a small doubt and I had a small doubt about one of her PhD subjects, and we started discussing. And then she said, I learned a lot from her. And hopefully she learned something from what I had to say. And that caught on. And then subsequently, there were so many small projects where I took her help. And she invited me over here, and I'm with you. And that was a small window of opportunity. And at least 5 out of my 10 projects which I've done, or collaborators I work with in different parts of the country and world, are because of serendipity. Probably just sat together, probably a post-conference over dinner or in the banquet, and then we started talking, and casually some idea came up. And I think one of my areas of interest, which was mentioned rightly so when they introduced me, was HIV. And the way our institution got into HIV is once again serendipity. Dr. Suniti Solomon, who's no more, a fantastic microbiologist, who was the first to discover HIV, happened to casually meet my boss at that time in a particular place. They spoke to one another, and then we started our HIV project, and now we have a cohort of almost 5,000 cases, and that is serendipity. So when you're a researcher, you need to keep your eye and mind open for ideas, and your interaction with other people open for future possibilities. And that's very difficult. So what I do is, every opportunity someone asks me, I try to do, if I have time, to take part in it. And, so it's helpful to them, it's helpful to me, and maybe mutually over a period of time, we may collaborate on a single project. So this I cannot emphasize. So if you sit in your lab doing only research, you're not going to get money no matter how good your work is. You need to go out there, you need to meet people, you need to network. These are the 3 fundamental things you need to. If you ask me what are the 3 most important things: publication, partnering, and networking. Networking, I cannot emphasize too much. Let me tell you this, a major portion of the ideas for international grant comes in the banquet during conferences. And I see a lot of students saying, I don't attend banquet, let me go. I mean, conferences you need to have fun. I'm not saying no. But that is when you meet people in one single place. If you have an association and a conference, you meet all of them. During sessions, you may not get to interact with them, but during the dinner, during the banquet, take some time to go out, mingle with people. You'll be surprised at how many contacts you make, how much networking you do. And that's good for collaboration and funding. And partnering is very important too. Publications, I think all this was mentioned by our esteemed Vice Chancellor. You cannot get a good grant without them. At least 2 per year. It's very important. And once again, hierarchy of evidence. Shoot for tier 1 in your area. If you cannot, the next year, but try to shoot for the topmost in your area of specialty. Contribute to chapters. If you get an opportunity, contribute to books. Keep writing small reports. If you're a medical person, case reports, small briefs, small communications, small letters to the editor. Improve your visibility in your specialty. Talk to people, exchange ideas with people. Make your presence felt in meetings, make your presence felt in conferences. Once people know you, then you start getting a bigger network and calls for collaborations and projects. It's very important to identify who's interested in what you're interested in. So when you're taking a particular area of interest, when I need to work on a particular project, the first thing is I Google and see all the top people who publish in that area, who are well known in that area. Try to establish communication with them. You'd be surprised. A lot of times they'd be on the verge of starting a project and they wouldn't mind taking you in at a smaller scale, probably to begin with, which may move on to bigger things. So it's very important you do your homework. State and central government. I cannot overemphasize this in the Indian context. So state associations, governmental organizations, talk to people who would be interested in seeing you improve. Community projects, these are very, very good. Projects within your community. Like, for example, if you're a medical person, screening for diabetes, screening for some health, if there's a community project, maybe a district collector in a particular area, or maybe the local councillor is coming, you can make that. So that becomes a clipping in a press, and then that goes into your CV. You're helping the community and you're helping yourself also. That's a win-win situation. Other departments and schools, and this I cannot emphasize once again in the Indian context, don't just stick to your department. When I have learned a lot from other departments, when I belong to a specialty which can pretty much work with all other specialties because our basic science is like that. So talk to other people. You'd be surprised that a lot of times when I get proposals, I'd be surprised that I get 2 proposals from an institution, from 2 different departments, the same project, and they are not aware that each one has sent a project. That is a little bit sad. Doesn't happen very often. Happens. So make sure that all of you are on the same page. And today's world, that happens because all institutions have an ethical board. So pretty much every department knows what the other department is doing when you have your institutional ethics committee. So take some time to interact with other people. I'm sure that's not the case with your institution, but there are situations where that happens. And then schools, especially when you're doing qualitative work in medicine and dentistry. Schools are fantastic places to do epidemiological work with the correct permission and with the correct ethical protocol in place. Work with other universities. So for example, if you take Tamil Nadu, university to the other university, you can collaborate, and that becomes a collaborative process. Networking. This is very, very important. You cannot get a grant if you don't have a good network. Or let me rephrase that. You cannot get a big grant if you don't network. Make yourself present at all national conferences. You will not sit in your lab and get money. It's very, very difficult to do that. Review papers. Now, this is the order of the day. The moment you publish a paper, the journal will send you 2-3 articles to review. Accept them, however busy you are. Because when you have sent a paper, the reviewers have denied it, the paper is not going to get accepted. That's your responsibility. That is something which you need to do. Accept papers for review. Helps in 2 ways. You learn from other people's mistakes. 2, you get new ideas. Oh, okay, this is also another way of thinking. 3, you know what are the other people working in your field of interest even before it is published. So it's very, very helpful. Be in scientific panels. Even when you go to a conference, you can be a part of a panel. You don't necessarily have to present. If you can, please do. Sit on advisory councils. For example, if the institution has got an advisory council, volunteer. I know it's extra work. I know you have to stay a long time in the evening. But if you need to be a good researcher, put in your advisory council. Then when you put it on your CV that I'm in the advisory council of my institution, then the funding agency knows that you're a person who's got some responsibility and the institution trusts you with some responsibility. It will help, trust me. It could be something as simple as looking after the attendance of all the students. So you say in charge of attendance council or whatever name you give to it. Contact governmental agencies periodically to find out either through the net if they have any openings there. You need to almost be a habit every weekend or once a week, just log on to these websites of interest and make sure any proposal is open or not. Okay. Keep in touch with national and international figures in your area of interest. And that's a no-brainer. Keep in touch because once they know you and you know them, that becomes a network. And not only you collaborate, you make good friends for life. And research is good in that way. You meet with friends in different countries. So it's not only about working, your networking of friends also increase. And that gives you a very, very satisfying and fulfilled research experience and personal life. Develop a reputation. So right from when you start, you need to develop a reputation, and you need publications, partnering, and networking. These are the three mantras for developing a good reputation. Keep publishing. That alone is not sufficient. Partner with other institutions and other centers and other investigators. Network. So you need not necessarily always be about funding and getting projects and working together. Network. Keep in touch. Talk to them. Discuss your sub area of interest. Make presentations in conference, review papers and proposals, be in state and national advisories. And now you have this unique group, so-called blogs. Every specialty you take, there are internet interest groups. And that is very interesting. So internet is a double-edged sword, I realize that. But it is fantastic. Any experiment I have a problem for a particular problem, there's a particular group. Now, I don't want to advertise any particular group on this forum. You go into that, and it's surprising. People, when you look at their face and ask for advice, are not as kind as when you ask them on the internet. For some reason, people in the internet are very kind and give out answers very quickly. And that's been my experience. Okay. Now, this is as far as your mind frame and how exactly you build a reputation, so that not only do you become a good researcher, not only do you get enough money, but also you have a very satisfying life as a researcher. And that is very important. Your lifestyle is important. Because this era, wherever you go, people talk about work-play balance. This is very important, work-play balance. Now, what are the authorities looking for? Let us look at the other side of the table. When I get a grant or a proposal, or when a funding agency gets a grant or a proposal, what is it this person is doing that we already do not know? That is one thing they look for. The second one is, why is it worth knowing? Why is it worth knowing? Is it really worth our time and money to fund it? Excuse me. Yeah, sorry, somebody was knocking. I'm sorry. This is one of the problems of working from home. Why is it worth knowing? And how will we know the conclusions are valid? Is this person really talking through his hat, or do you know that this is valid? So these are the three important things. What are we going to learn that we do not know now? Why is it worth knowing? How will we know the conclusions are valid? So these are the three things they look for. This is expanded, those points expanded. Just take a look at this. Let me take a sip of water. Just take a look at this. Sorry about that. Okay. First of all, is there a lacunae in the information that you can fill? Do you have the capacity to start this procedure? Do you have enough support and collaboration? Are there multidisciplinary application? Is what this person doing going to be applicable to other fields? Has somebody already invested in you? It could be an institution. It could be, that's what I said, before you get a big grant, get a training grant for the project, get an infrastructure grant, get a seminar grant, something to do with the project. You call people who are experts in that particular field. You invite them over and get a funding for that. It's an idea novel or interesting. You spoke about that right in the beginning. Is it anything new? Is it both interesting and important? It's not sufficient to just to be interesting. It should be important. Most importantly, what credit the funding agency will get out of it. So everybody is in it for a win situation. So you need to make up your mind, okay, if that should be a part of your proposal. If you do this, you as a funding agency may get a chance to patent this particular thing, or no other funding agency has done this in this way. They may have done it in another way, this way. And there are a couple of important points. Today, big grants are invariably multi-center. No organization wants to give a big grant to a single institution because of logistical issues. So they need to be sure that when they give their money, it's been well taken care of. So they want collaboration between 2 or 3 institutes. So if you collaborate, network, and write as a multidisciplinary project, you're more likely to get funded than as a single institution and as a single investigator. That's almost the rule of thumb for big projects. Okay. What you should never do, never fall into this trap because these are reputation spoilers, and it's very, very difficult to get out of the trap. Never plagiarize. If you've taken it somewhere, put it in inverted commas, write down whom you have taken it from, where you have taken it from, acknowledge the person from where you're quoting or the journal from which you're taking. Don't ever forget to do that. But today, plagiarism is very easy to catch. And every institution of repute I know have got some issues with plagiarism inadvertently. By that I mean it wasn't done purposefully, without their knowledge. Ironically, a lot of times when I would quote my article from another article which I've already written, I forget the fact that I've signed off the copyright statement to that particular journal. So even then I have to quote from which, even though it may be my primary article, I may have written it, but it's no longer valid for me to just quote it without telling where I've got it from. So plagiarism can be a very tricky business. And that is why a lot of institutions I know, before projects are submitted for funding, they have an anti-plagiarism committee. You have, in addition to the IRB or the Institutional Review Board, you have to submit it to this committee. They run it through software to make sure that even by mistake, without your knowledge, you don't commit plagiarism, because different people can get the idea at the same time. Doesn't mean you copied it from someone, but you need to be very careful. And this is a very, very important thing in research today. And never make the statement claiming no previous work exists. I mean, I still get grants which say that nobody has done this before. Even if it is so, don't write it like that. The correct statement to make is probably, we think nobody has addressed this problem like we are. That would be better than saying nobody has done this work. Acknowledge all existing work. Now, this is very important because you may have a friendly rivalry, working rivalry with a colleague who's working in the same field. But when you send a project for a proposal and it goes to two other experts, it may go to your friend with whom you're having a friendly rivalry, or it may go to another group who has already done work. And if you have acknowledged them in your bibliography, you're safe. If you don't acknowledge them, right there your thing is going to get rejected. So it is respecting people. I mean, do not, how do I put this nicely? Do not mistake personal equations for professional equations. Doesn't happen. So when somebody has done work in your field, I'm sure none of you do that, but just a note of caution. When somebody has done work in your field, acknowledge them, because they may land up as being the reviewer of your project. Don't think traditionally. Conventional thinking never gets you money. So you need to think innovatively. And this is a problem with very many projects. They want to do everything. You look at what you want to do and the budget. The moment I do that, or any reviewer does that, they know you're not being serious. People have like, I want to do this, A, B, C, and D within 2 years, and I will do it with so much money. And when we calculate it and see, I mean, budget writing is another art by itself. We know there is no way this person is going to do this. And you have to understand that people who review a project are experienced investigators who have gone through all this. It is better to over budget, claim less. So always claim that you're going to do less, ask for more. Your project won't get rejected. It will come back saying that refine your budget. But if you claim too much and ask for less, your project will get rejected. Take it from me. So it is always to err on the side of claiming to do exactly what you want, which is a very specific question, not necessarily doing less, and asking for a higher budget, reasonably higher budget with well accounted for under the subheadings, rather than saying you're going to do a lot of things and claim a small budget. No funding authority is going to write back to you and say, please ask for a bigger budget, your science is good. Not going to happen. So if you're going to earn on a lesser number of objectives with more money, rather than more objectives, less money. But when we write, we think if we claim we're going to do all this with less money, they're going to give us money. It's not going to happen. That's a very common mistake people do when they start their project. And once again, this is the thing I said, hoping the reviewers will figure it out. And I made this point right in the beginning when I spoke about the grant proposal contents. Don't think that the reviewer is going to understand everything. Make sure that you don't have to necessarily dump it down, but make sure that your points are very clear. And even for a person who has not worked in the field, but who's in your specialty, will be able to grasp the idea which you're conveying across the table. So that's very important. Okay, now comes to the actual nitty-gritty, funding. So don't think of funding as a very small thing like, very small area of funding agencies. Look broadly. Look at smaller amounts too. A lot of people overlook NGOs. There are a lot of non-governmental organizations which will fund you for community work. We can start your project with that. Companies. Companies have a huge fund, what is called CRO, Company Responsibility Fund, where social responsibility fund, they have a company social responsibility fund, where they have to invest this much money for tax exemption in social projects or medical projects. This is for medical people and dental people. So you can tap that resource. You'll be surprised at how much money you can get. At the institutional level, local bodies, state bodies, central bodies. So go step by step before you straight away hit a central body for a fund of, say, 70 or 80 lakhs or 1 crore. Build up on all these small institutions, small amounts of money. So what that will tell your big funders is that, one, you have the capacity to get money from other people. Other people trust you. And once you get the money, you complete the project. So this is your credit rating as far as research is concerned. So when you do that to small projects, you build your credit worthiness, you build your funding ability to be funded. And then when you go to a bigger organization as a multi-institutional study, your curriculum vitae becomes very, very fundable. Your science becomes very, very fundable. Once, of course, you're asking the right question and the right project. As far as the medical specialty is concerned, this is tapped from the website. All of you can Google it and see. I'm not going to go into detail. IDA, you have tons of acronyms. IDA is Indian Dental Association, Indian Council of Medical Research, Department of Biotechnology, Department of Science and Technology. ICMR, DBT, and DST are top out there. And of course, Central Science and Industrial Research, Defense Department, DRDO, Department of Atomic Energy. They have some funds for certain medical projects. Ayush, if you're doing of course, there are tons of Indo-foreign collaboration. Most of the top organizing agencies like ICMR, DBT, DST, they have proposals for collaboration with particular institutes in particular countries. You have Indo-Australian collaboration by the DST or DBT. You have Indo-American collaboration and specific universities. You just need to Google it depending upon the project which you're going to do, and totally depends on that. I'm not going to take you through this. I'm just telling you some of the websites here. I will probably hand over a PDF copy to the organizers, so you don't need to, or you can Google it yourself. These are all the different websites of biotechnology, science and technology, UGC, Science and Engineering Board, SERBI, BRNS. There are tons of organizations out here. So I will give them a PDF format. You can take it down, or you can Google it yourself. And you will see that for everything, they have for PhDs, they have appointment in research institutes. Look at the headings. There are tons of headings. It's not just doing research and getting money, for starting your career, for your first project. Women have some exclusive grant depending upon the situation they are in, newly joined with a family and have discontinued, like I said earlier. So there are different headings under which you can apply. So if you apply at the correct heading, your competition will be less and you're more likely to get that. And you can go for smaller grants, the low-hanging fruits first, and then go for the bigger ones. Okay, these are the different ministries which can have different funding projects. Okay, so this is very important. And I love this phrase, to guide your future, look back from ahead. Think about that. You need to know where you want to be. But then that's how you can take steps today to reach that particular goal. These 4 questions are important. Where do you want to be? What do you like to accomplish? What kind of impact do you like to make? And what legacy do you want to leave behind? They sound very cliched and philosophical, but these are very important if you're going to make research your career. This actually finishes the research and funding part. I have a few slides, if it's okay with you, on just some important mistakes we make when writing. It's about 10 or 12 slides. Do you want me to go ahead, or I can stop here for questions? Any of the administrators?
So, how long would it take, sir?
There's about 10 slides. It's going to take me about 5-6 minutes.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, fine. Now, quickly, because this is what 2 of the people I think asked these questions, how do we write a grant? So I'll tell you what are the mistakes that you can make quickly. This is something I do for writing articles to journals, but holds good for proposals too. Tense is very important. See, English is not a language that you speak, so you need to be very careful. When you write an abstract, it should be in past tense. Introduction should be in present tense. Methods and result in past tense. And discussion will vary between past and present. When you're talking about the current results we say we found. And when our results are consistent with, then we use present tense. So this is very important. So please give it to somebody who knows English. There's nothing wrong in that, because we tend to make a lot of mistakes in grammar, and it looks bad when you send a proposal with bad English. Avoid passive voice. And there's a lot of these are medical examples. Just converse in size. Try not to use passive voice, because active voice is shorter, to the point when you're writing proposals. Don't use long, convoluted sentences. It irritates the examiner. And I'll tell you how you can make out whether they've written this way or not towards the end. You don't write methods that are quantitative or preferred. Quantitative methods are preferred. Don't use redundant words. For example, the sample was yellow in color. The sample was yellow. That's more than enough. And in fact, there's a computer program which I run proposals through to make sure that the English is okay, or I send it back for English correction. Use minimal words. In my opinion, it is not an unjustified or something. You say, I think. Don't say 1 out of every 2. You say half. Don't say surgical procedure. You say operation. Keep it simple. You see how many mistakes we make actually. In medical field, we make antibody was added to each individual vial. It doesn't make any sense. Each vial is more than enough. And these are the words you want to avoid. You don't say we take positive action for this project. Don't say there's a distinct possibility. Don't take it's my personal opinion. If it's your opinion, it's personal. You can't say somebody else's opinion. Don't say it's diametrically opposed. Opposed is opposed. And don't say we're actively considering it. If you're considering it, it's active. You can't passively consider something. These we do when we talk. But when you write a proposal, don't do this. Especially when you're writing an international proposal, people don't like these things. And do not use these phrases in a project. Every reviewer hates these words. As a matter of fact, in a very real sense, in a sense, it is interesting to note that, obviously you're writing because it's interesting to note that. Never write this in a scientific article. It should be noted that, and we're noting that. And reviewers get irritated when you do this very frequently. And even though your science is good, you may get rejected because you're using these terms without your knowledge, because people haven't told you this is wrong. And let us make it clear that, which means all the other things that you're saying were not clear. That's the message you're sending. And if you say needless to say, the first thing the reviewer will comment is, then why are you saying it? So I've seen this in a lot of articles. So don't use this in articles. Don't use this in projects. It's very important that you avoid this. And this is something, I'll skip this. Okay. There are ways in which editors test for English. One of them is called the Gunning Fog Index. You can actually put the Word document, and it uses a formula. It shows how complex your writing is, whether it's an active voice or passive voice. Sometimes editors will use, there are multiple programs for this. So you can run it through these programs, and it will tell you whether your English is sufficient for reviewing or for a fund or for a particular project. And ideally, the index should fall between this red value. So index between 10 to 13. So you can download this program. And then when you're writing an article, you can run this article to the particular program and then go back and correct your English if you're not sure, or get somebody's help. Okay, that's a quick few slides. Because in addition to all the facts which I mentioned, like partnering, networking, knowing the nitty-gritty, knowing the anatomy of your research proposal, knowing the process which is involved, good writing is also involved. And sometimes good writing, at a subconscious level, we don't realize what mistakes we're making. We do it just like how we speak. And a lot of times, a good science will get rejected because your English is wrong. And when you get back a report saying that correct for language, it becomes very frustrating, because some reviewers will tell you what to correct for, but some will not tell you. They'll say correct for language. And then it becomes very, very tricky. You get frustrated. You take it down and put it in a lesser in-text journal. You don't need to do that. You have softwares which are available. You have people who can help you out. And once you do 2-3 articles, and like some of the errors which I pointed out, which is commonly done, you start improving. You start becoming better writers and become better researchers. So let me conclude by saying this. You don't write because you want to say something. You write because you've got to say something. Okay? Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Let me stop here. Hand it over to the administrators.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for the wonderful lecture. So clear and comprehensive, and research demystified in the best possible way. The 4 pillars, 8 steps, attitude, aptitude, techniques, the nitty-gritties of grant proposals, and more importantly, life lessons for researchers. I'm sure there were a lot of takeaways. We just have a few questions from the participants.
Okay.
Can I post them, sir, to you?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to get back to the screen. Yeah, if you can just read them out to me.
Yes, yes, I will.
Yeah, thank you.
There is this question from Mr. Saravanan, who asks, if a technique or process has to be patented, then it should not be published in public domain. Please explain this.
Could you repeat that again?
A technique or a process that is going for a patenting process should not be published in public domain, and they need some explanation regarding this.
Okay, now I studiously kept away from the patent procedure because patenting and how to apply for patenting is a huge process, and different countries have different rules depending upon what you can patent. And it's important to know that not only can you patent a product, but you can also patent a method of making a product. The methodology also can be patented. Okay, and there are a lot of steps. You could apply for a provisional patent, and you can make a note that you're going to publish it depending upon which category it falls, whether you're making a new product or you're taking a current methodology, modifying the methodology, and the modification is going to be patented. There are people who will help us out, and we have a couple of people who we work with in our institution. I think your institution also has people working with patent, and I can give you the email link of those persons, and you could talk to them. And I think it is better to go case by case basis, depending on what exactly you're trying to patent, rather than having a universal, a single rule that says that we should not publish in public domain. Okay, so make it very clear which aspect of your research you're going to patent. So that is very, very important. Okay. All right. Next.
The next question: is it a must to get ethical clearance to use an Android or smartphone app on human subjects?
Okay. The best question, the best answer I give is, when in doubt, get it. Because by default, what actually happens is every journal will ask for an ethical clearance. Okay. For a qualitative questionnaire, we did a recent questionnaire regarding the COVID situation and the mental status of some group of people, one particular cohort of people. You need to get ethical clearance, but we're just asking them questions. One way out of that is if you anonymize. But when you use a program, Android program or an iOS or whatever program you're using, inherently there is no anonymity because you can track down the number. So the ethical thing comes about anonymity, the ability to use data of a particular person. Let me give you a very, very classic example. The ethical considerations are very complex. And that is why when you have an ethical board, you have a social active person, you have a nurse, you have a non-scientific person. All of you are aware of Hela cells, right? In cancer, these are human cervical cells, Hela cells. These were obtained many years back for research. A lot of good research is done on Hela cells. It was obtained from a single patient. The cell was obtained from a single patient. Many years down the road, the relatives of the patient filed a case against everybody saying that these cells should be patented. I mean, this has been used for ages together because the permission was not obtained to do scientific experiment. So if you are in doubt, no matter how insignificant it seems, present it to your institutional ethics committee and get it cleared. And I cannot overemphasize that because the ramifications of being ethical are too subtle and it's very difficult to figure out. Let your institution figure it out. It's safer, or you may not be able to publish it. You may get good results, you may not be able to publish it. So when in doubt, always get it cleared. And if it is not needed, your institution will say that we don't need to give an ethical clearance for this. You're safe, you're absolutely fine. Let the committee decide that for you. Okay.
The next question, sir. I'm going to couple the next two questions together.
Okay.
What are the problems which are likely to be faced by a new research scholar? And what are the characteristics of a bad research? I think you have covered this. If you like to add something more to
the first thing I would say as a new research scholar is frustration. Because usually we are good in science. It's the non-science part, getting things done, the protocol. The thing I'll say is don't lose heart. But those are also important parts. And that's why I keep telling you, get a PhD. It's a doctorate in philosophy. It's a mental framework of mind. And if you're passionate enough, which I'm sure most of you are to begin with when you do research, it should not be a problem. I wouldn't worry about that. So don't get frustrated. I think that's the biggest problem. And for people who are in clinical specialty and try to do research, research is very time consuming. It's not like your clinical problems where you get answers very quickly. So you need to be very, very patient. And if you're a part of an institution, you need to make the institution understand that research is a long-term proposal. Because I get a lot of researchers saying that I can't make my institution understand that it takes so much time. Yeah, that goes along with research. That's a part of the parcel. And you need to do the convincing, and you need to convince them that it's important for them. The institution's reputation is going to go up. We're going to get more publications. So you need to convince them. It's a hard sell, but you need to do that. That's also a part of your research, convincing people that they need to invest in you. That is also important in research, not just science. Okay. And what's the second part?
Characteristics of bad research. I think you've already covered that in your presentation.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about bad. The only thing is, so one single word, be ethical. And that's all very easy now because you have an ethical committee. And I'm sure you're all aware that in an ethical committee or an institutional review, not only you get your proposal accepted, every 6 months you're supposed to present it and make sure that the committee understands that what you're doing is correct. So that way, it becomes the collective responsibility of all the experts, and the experts will guide you everywhere. That's what I said right in the beginning. I mean, one of the slides. Accept all criticisms positively and make it improve your project. Don't take it negatively. Don't take it personal. Especially in the institutional ethical board, people may raise questions, but it's a collective responsibility. So once you do it, you're 100% sure that nobody else is going to find fault with you later. So the idea is a single person's responsibility becomes transposed to a committee of experts who will guide you in the right way. So today it's very easy because of the institutional ethics committee, because at every stage you can get their approval, so you won't make any inadvertent mistakes. And be true to your science. That's a very cliched statement, but yeah, that's the only way you can do good research.
The next question is, in the present COVID scenario, is there any specific funding agency to which we can apply for?
Oh, there are a lot of funding agencies, but I don't know how many of them are fully staffed to see your projects. These are difficult times. Please, you need to understand that we need to be sympathetic to it because the government is swamped with work, and it's going to be difficult for them to prioritize any non-COVID work. I'm sure they will consider it, but there's going to be a time frame over which it will be considered. And if the submissions are open on their website, please do apply. Please do apply. But be prepared to have a little bit of delay because now everybody is hard pressed for time. And almost all institutions have been impacted by the COVID-19 scenario. The best thing to do is apply for something COVID related. And if it's good, you've got good collaborators, I'm sure it's going to get funded quickly.
The next one is how to avoid duplication of our work during presentation or funding or patent proposal.
Extremely impossible. Extremely impossible. That's why you need to develop a reputation. Because, I mean, for example, we had this discussion in a trial session yesterday, whether to put my presence in public domain. And once you present it out in the net, nothing is private. Everything is public. And I get a lot of data from the net, and I take troubles to acknowledge everybody who does it. Even if it's a quote, I try to acknowledge who's given the quote because it's copyrighted material. And even if it is not copyrighted, it's a responsibility to do that, and it's very, very difficult. It's like what they say for the secret, If you don't want somebody to know a secret, don't tell it to anybody. That's the only way, and that's very difficult in science. So the easier way is if you're doing some project, quickly publish it in some journal. So it is out there in the record that you have done it. So if somebody else does it also, people know that you have already done it. So actually assuring that nobody else copies it, paradoxically, the best way is to make sure it is there on the public domain. That's the best way to do it. So that once it is out there on public domain, the date which you submitted, the date which you published is fine. Anything subsequent is going to be a problem. But this is a two-edged sword. Sometimes when you keep something secret and you've been working on it for 3 years, somebody who has done it for only 1 year quickly publishes it, and nobody's going to believe that you've done it for 3 years. Goes back to my original slide, communication. If you want to be good, you want to move ahead, you want to make sure that people give you credit for what you're doing, communicate. I mean, hear this a lot of times, and it's happened to me a couple of times. Myself and my colleague will decide a project, We'll do out everything, we'll do a pilot study, and something else will come take importance, we'll forget about it, and a year down the road, we'll see somebody has published our idea, and we just keep hitting our ends and, oh God, we should have followed this up. Happens all the time. So the best way is communicate. If you're scared of duplication, do it quickly and publish it quickly. Even if somebody duplicates, they will give you credit for it. That's the best way I see around the problem.
So the last question for the day, sir. Can the PG syllabus stress more on research and writing so that the PGs are not confined to just the dissertation?
I think a lot of pressure on me because I'm a PG teacher and Dr. Kritika is also a PG teacher, I presume. Frankly, it's a very difficult scenario because postgraduates are really stretched thin. But they've got to know a lot of things. It's not only research, they have to concentrate on what their specialty teaches them. In a subject like pathology, that can be very, very, very vast. So what we try to do is, what at least I do, may not work for everybody. We used to give library dissertation initially, which could correspond to what their main dissertation is, so they don't reduplicate work, save some time, and also have an in-depth knowledge of what they're doing. That is acceptable in some scenarios. Now we have shifted. So instead of library dissertation, we ask them to do a small research and publish it. So we don't give them that becomes a library dissertation. That is acceptable, actually. So what happens is, once they get some publication even before they graduate or immediately after they graduate, two, they know the nitty-gritty of research protocol, what mistake to do, what's an aim, what's an objective, how to do. So that makes their dissertation easier and gives them more confidence when they defend the dissertation. So the library dissertation is actually good if you use it correctly. If you use it as an extension for your dissertation or as a part of your dissertation, that's good. Two, you can give them an article, a small project, not something which is humongous, something which they can do within 6 months. And that's the time they're going to spend for their library dissertation anyways. So it is a win-win situation because the student gets an article, the department gets an article, the institution gets an article, and they get experience in writing your dissertation. And your problem of correcting the dissertation becomes easier because the student is well-versed in how to write. So it helps everybody and everybody benefits from it. So this is what I said, right from the beginning. You don't have to change an existing situation to do good. Or you don't have to bring something new. You take the whatever problem you have and see if you can slightly tune it so that it helps you and help the student also at the same time. And of course, make sure that it's all relevant to the university which you're teaching because each university may have its own criteria for what to give and what not to give. So take that into consideration. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and patience.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was nice talking to you all. And thank you for organizing it excellently. And hope, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hope people benefited from what we had to say. And it was, I realized, very broad. But given my criteria to do a presentation, hopefully I've done some justification to that. Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks now. Our huge thank you to our Honorable Chairman, Thiru A.C. Shanmugam sir, for his vision and leadership. A special thanks to our Honorable President, Thiru A.C.S. Arun Kumar sir, for being the guiding force behind all our endeavors. Special thanks to our Honorable Secretary, Thiru A. Ravi Kumar sir, for all his support and guidance. A heartfelt thanks to our respected VC Madam, Dr. Hela Lakshmi, for all her encouragement and support. And heartfelt thanks to our respected Registrar, Dr. Panivelu, for his help and support. Special thanks to Dean Research, Dr. Tirunavukarasu sir, for his support and cooperation. And a special thanks to our principal, Thai Mugambike Dental College, Dr. Ratika Rai, for all her encouragement. And our thanks are also due to the Dean EPA, Dr. Ramesh, for his support, Dr. Manivannan, Dean Phase 2 Campus, and Mr. Ganesh, System Admin, all the executives, deans, HODs, teaching staff of all the campuses. We have had an overwhelming response. We are truly humbled by the response that we have received. And I'm sure they've all benefited immensely from your lecture, sir. Nobody could have done it better than you. Thank you for that. And my special thanks to the organizing team, Dr. A.G. Srinivasan, Additional Dean Research, Dr. Ganesan, Additional Dean Research, Dr. Priya Ramani, Professor, Thai Mugambike Dental College, Mr. Vinod, Research Scholar, who were instrumental in putting this together. Our thanks are also due to some of the non-teaching staff, Mrs. Saudambal from Research Office, Mr. Sena from the Registrar Office, all the staff, and my personal thanks to all the staff and postgraduate students of my department, Oral Medicine Radiology, Dr.M.G.R Dental College Hospital, for all their support in all our endeavors. And of course, thanks a million to our esteemed guest speaker for your time and patience. It was such a pleasure and privilege to have you with us. And thanks to all the participants for your overwhelming reception to our program, and really has been a great source of motivation to all of us. So the feedback certificate link would have been posted in the chat box. So kindly fill in your name and institution correctly for the certificates. And only 100 certificates can be generated each day. So please wait until 24th to receive your certificate. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining this meeting. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, sir?
Absolutely. Have a great weekend. Keep safe and take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Sir, your presentation was very nice. We didn't even realize 2 hours has passed. So it was very much interesting. So I also feel that audience, all the participants also would have felt the same thing. So I thank you once again, sir.